to Pocketables News Roundup number 4. This has been a super exciting week on the PC hardware side. We've got some exciting things going on the smartphone side of the world as well. So let's just go ahead and jump right into things. The Nvidia 3000 series cards are finally official. We've been leading up to this for the past couple of weeks. We've had bits and pieces of information and rumors as Nvidia was counting down to launch day. And now that all the details are on the table, to put it bluntly, these cards are absolute monsters. At the top end, we have a 90 series card, a 3090, which is something we haven't had for several generations. This appears to be taking the place of what would have last generation been called the 2080 Ti, except with performance more on par with the prosumer focused 2080 RTX Titan at a much lower price point. We're looking at $1,500 for this card. On the other side of that equation is we have a 3080, which is now outperforming everything that was released in the 2000 series, and a 2070, the smallest of the cards that was announced this week at $499, is on paper more capable than the outgoing 2080 Ti. This is not something that I would normally say we can compare without real world testing across vendors, but since this is still Nvidia and effectively the 3000 series it is ampier, it's a new architecture, but it's like a refined Turing architecture. It's not a brand new clean slate design. So we can compare apples to weird Apple hybrids on paper at least. It's not this huge dissimilar jump. So to look at that on paper, the 2070 is more powerful. Sorry, the new 3070 is more powerful than the outgoing 2080 Ti. People are already dumping their 2080 Ti's on eBay for $500 and less. So if you don't want to wait for the new 30 series cards to start shipping later this month and in mid-October for the 3070, well, if you wanted a 2080 Ti, now's the time to get one. That said, you'll still be better off waiting just a couple of weeks to get your hands on the brand new Ampere Silicon. There's a ton of other new features baked in. One that they're touting is this new RTX IO, where the card's going to be able to directly communicate with storage to take the CPU out of the equation as far as decompressing assets is concerned. The ability to bypass the CPU for decompressing assets is something that we've seen consoles adopting on their plans for the new PlayStation 5. It looks like Nvidia may actually beat Sony and AMD to the punch with the availability as far as that's concerned. As far as the practical impact this is going to have in games, getting textures to the card faster is always something that has been a goal every single generation. With the ability of PCI Express to kind of act as a point-to-point communications bus that doesn't have to go through the CPU every single time, this seems like a natural evolution, but the actual impact and performance is something we'll have to wait to see games and potentially games that support it. I believe this requires a new API on Microsoft's side as well. This may be the feature that finally makes relevant one of the other changes that we're getting with the new RTX 3000 series cards, is that these are PCI Express 4 cards. On the consumer side, most cards even aren't really held back by a 16x PCI Express 1.1 link. A 2.0 by 8 or a 3.0 by 4 typically will get you 90% or more performance even on the top tier cards. So that leaves a ton of bandwidth underutilized, and I think that this particular technology may be what finally makes all of that bandwidth that's there, it's on paper, finally useful outside of academic scenarios, things like AI acceleration, where just getting data to and from the card as fast as you can, letting the graphics cards talk to each other, is always a huge benefit. On the CPU side of the world, we have what was a much tamer launch. We have Tigerlake. Unfortunately, it's really just being released as laptop chips this generation, just like previous launches we've seen from Intel. And Tigerlake itself is relatively mild on the CPU side. We're getting a new process. They're calling it 10 nanometer super fin, which is just their way of avoiding calling it 10 nanometer plus plus. We finally have a mature 10 nanometer process that we can ship products in volume. But we also have Intel making some missteps, I think, in this. They're claiming that TDP is not a useful metric anymore and not really disclosing what some of these chips are in a very public fashion. And to a certain degree, I can see the marketing spin for that. A lot of people buy a laptop, they don't care what the TDP of the chip in the laptop is, they care about that experience when they buy the system. So for mobile chips, I can see maybe making that claim, but you still have to publish that number. It's still a useful number for people to compare across systems. It's not really fair to compare a 50-watt TDP Intel chip to a 15-watt TDP AMD chip. And although that might not be something your consumer Best Buy is going to do, that's definitely something that most of the technical professionals I've seen are picking up on and are really not pleased to see. As far as other things that we're going to see with Tigerlake, we are seeing a refined core design. Um, Nothing particularly huge there, but what we are seeing that is huge is our first glimpse of Intel's new pronouncing that wrong, their new XE graphics architecture. This is finally a competitive graphics architecture from Intel. They have talent that they hired from outside, from AMD actually, and I think we finally are going to have something that at least makes some of the lower tiered graphics cards that we've seen in previous generations somewhat redundant outside of upgrading older systems. That said, until the numbers are in, until we see driver support from Intel, which is typically not bad, but not always as competitive as Nvidia's is as far as game optimization is concerned, we have a bit of an unknown factor there. I'm looking forward to seeing Tigerlake show up on the desktop, where I think it has the potential to be much more interesting by finally bringing PCI Express 4 to an Intel desktop platform, and where no matter what they may claim on the marketing side, TDP is still hugely important. TDP may not be the best number since everybody likes to come up with it a slightly different way, but it is the number that helps people like me, when I'm building a system, identify what kind of cooling I need. I need very different cooling for a 35-watt desktop chip than I do for a 135-watt desktop chip. So hopefully they don't make that same blunder when the desktop Tigerlake chips finally show up. On the Android side, we have a couple of things going on, some of which don't really make sense to me. So the LG Velvet has been announced that it'll be available on T-Mobile, which is not super surprising. You know, it's a relatively high-end phone. I expected to see it here in the US on some of the carriers. But what I didn't expect to see was that the T-Mobile variant of the Velvet is going to use a MediaTek Dimensity 1000 chip, not the 765G from Qualcomm. Looking at the numbers on paper, my knee-jerk reaction to seeing a MediaTek chip in a phone was unwarranted. Usually, I only see MediaTek chips in much cheaper devices, and that's kind of been their niche. You don't want to pay Qualcomm for the chip, you can get a cheap MediaTek chip that'll be just fine. This Dimensity 1000 chip, at least by the numbers, is capable of outperforming the 765 while still being a 5G chipset, which is all fine and well. They're both similar enough designs. But what I don't understand is why we're seeing a change. I can't imagine that the T-Mobile version of the LG Velvet is going to be enough volume to justify a unique board to support a completely different vendor's chip. It's not like we saw them announce it with, some more RAM or additional storage or something like that. Variants like that are fairly normal. We saw Sprint do something like that with the OnePlus 7 Pro 5G. They got specifically 256 gig of storage version with a slightly bigger battery. To see this doesn't quite add up. As far as I know, this is the only Mediatek variant of the LG Velvet. Maybe there's more coming. Maybe these Dimensity 1000 chips are going to suddenly explode, just like the first generation Snapdragon chips did, where they were the hot chip on the market. Now that Qualcomm doesn't quite have the leverage they did on the patent side. That said, all of that will be interesting to watch play out over the next few weeks when those finally get into people's hands. That may be one that I even get a chance to take a look at since I'm a T-Mobile customer. Sprint and T-Mobile merged. On the chip side for phones, the Snapdragon 4 series chips have been announced to carry 5G modems going forward. This is the continued progression of Qualcomm pushing 5G radios further down the stack. Originally, you could only get an 800 series chip with a 5G modem, and then we had 700 series chips with integrated 5G modems, which was actually better than the 865 having to use an external modem, which shouldn't be the case for the next generation. And then we saw them continue to push the tech further down into the 6 and now the 400 series chips. This is a huge benefit to 5G adoption as a technology. This means that people are going to be able to buy cheaper devices with 5G radios. That means that carriers don't have to necessarily consider keeping older cellular bands active for, say, 3G devices now that they can repurpose these. So their budget phones aren't going to be just Verizon or Sprint's case CDMA. They finally have LTE and now 5G devices that are available at lower price points. As far as when we will finally see devices with that released, I don't know. I've actually seen new devices released on 2017 and 2018 series chips this year that were Snapdragon 600 series devices. So these may take time to filter through and replace those cheaper designs that do tend to stick around longer. One product that I had held out a lot of hope for that was announced this week that I'm kind of disappointed to see how it evolved was the new Lenovo Smart Clock Essential. I have a first generation Lenovo Smart Clock and I think it's an absolutely fantastic device. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with what they've done with the Essential, which is put a simpler display on it to really cut it down bare bones. And hopefully that leads to a lower price point because right now they're releasing the new Essential at the same price you can buy a Gen 1 smart clock with. But what they failed to do, and where I think they've really made a misstep here, is they didn't improve any of the external I/O and charging capabilities. So for me, and I'm sure for many of you listening to this, I can have potentially up to 4 or 5 devices on my nightstand that I need to charge. I could have a phone, I could have a power bank, I can have wireless headphones, we've got a little beeper for training our dog that has a remote and a collar. So I can, on any given night, have up to 5 devices on my nightstand. Now, I don't expect Lenovo to release the smart clock with 5 USB ports for charging all the things all the time. But what I did anticipate, and what I had really hoped for, was to see number one, the USB port pick up some kind of quick charge support, and potentially even offer a USB-C port, and at least cover at least a 2 or a 3 device scenario for your typical user with a phone, and a pair of wireless headphones, potentially a power bank, since with everybody taking your headphone jacks away, we're now stuck charging our headphones every night. So I think that was something that they needed for me to say that that was a must have device, but something that they didn't either consider or choose to implement this generation. And what I mean by must have is you can spend $30 to get a multi port charger for charging your phone and things like that. Well, if it's $30 for that or $40 for alarm clock with a smart display with the ability to charge 3 items on it, that makes it a no-brainer, and then you can do all those fun smart things with it you are stuck using a home mini for now. Not inherently bad, it's still probably going to be a decent device, it's going to sell well, I'm sure, but I think they really could have made themselves the de facto smart clock choice by including a little bit more charging capability. We talked about the Zenfone 7 previously, and it's back in the news again this week. They actually released the source for the Zenfone 7 and the bootloader unlock. Those are fantastic. Those are things that I like seeing. That makes flashing additional ROMs and modifications to the device extremely easy on the side of developers, since they have all the things they need to work on that. Hopefully this continues to be updated as they make updates to the Zenfone 7, but at minimum, having those things available means that if Asus should fail to keep up with things, as it were, there's always the option of something like, I guess it's not Cyanogen mod anymore, but third-party ROMs. So I'm very happy to see Asus take that step. That was one of the things that I used to love about HTC devices when they were available in the US, is I could typically, the day that I bought my HTC device, go online, download their unlock tool, run it, and then flash a ROM within a few hours at, at the long end. So great to see, and that's actually something that has been a problem for me on other phones. And if you want to hear about where that actually forced me to warranty repair a phone because I could not get it unlocked, let me know and I'll lay out that whole saga, as it were. We've got some entertainment news this week. The Mandalorian Season 2 is starting October 30th. I know this is something that I've been looking forward to too. I really enjoyed the first season of it, and I'm hoping they keep up with the excellent storytelling that we saw before. It was really interesting from a technical perspective, some of the things that they did with Mandalorian that are not techniques that I've seen used before, and I hope that they continue to carry on with that. I'm sure everyone now has their Baby Yoda plush dolls and everything else. I know my wife has hers from Build-A-Bear, and we'll be squeezing it through the whole first episode as it's released. Um, I may reach out and see if Paul will do episodic reviews on that. I know that's something he's done in the past. More news on the entertainment side from Disney. This is a little bit less exciting. Mulan is something that should have been available much sooner, but's been kind of held up by the current health crisis, and finally has not one but two solid dates, one of which is kind of disappointing. The first is September 4th, which I believe is tomorrow. You'll be able to purchase a copy of Mulan to watch in 4U HD with HDR and all the fantastic sound stuff if you have an appropriate home theater setup. That's all fine and well. It's going to be about $30 US or some rough equivalent based on what country you're in. The disappointment here is that it's also going to be available for free for people who have a Disney Plus membership on December 4th, which means that all those people who pony up the extra $30 on top of the monthly subscription they're already paying for Mulan is going to get is the ability to watch it a couple of months sooner and potentially post some spoilers online. So I know that Disney wants to get their cost back for making this movie and that there's something to that. But I feel like if you're going to charge For the movie, there either A needs to be a longer exclusive window than that, or B that there has to be some kind of tangible benefit to the consumer. And it could be something really simple. I'm sure they could have whipped up some movie posters and shipped them to the billing address of the people who chose to purchase Mulan for $30. And for some people, that might be enough to buy the movie. They'll buy it for a poster. They may buy it if there's an action figure or something like that, some kind of tangible item that the consumer gets that they couldn't have just gotten by being patient for a few months. So I don't really know how well this is going to work out when the only benefit to the person who's already paying $7 a month for Disney Plus gets by paying that is just they get to watch it sooner. I'm sure there'll be some people who are very excited to see Mulan in live action, which is, from what I understand, going to be dramatically different from the translation that we saw in other uh, animation to live action movies previously. This is going to be much more of a period piece, whereas Beauty and the Beast was just animation. Here it is live action. Still a great movie for the kids, but not a whole ton changed. It was just the same story being retold. So that I don't see myself purchasing it. Maybe it's because I'm not as excited to see a period piece. I don't know. But I think if there was, as I mentioned, movie posters, just some kind of extra benefit to the consumer, that I think would be an easier pill for people to swallow. I think that's all we have this week. If there was anything that we didn't cover that you want us to touch on, or if there was anything that we glossed over and you want us to cover more in depth, I mentioned that not being able to unlock a bootloader actually effectively cost me a phone once. Let us know in the comments below, and we will make sure to follow up on it. If you have any other questions or comments, once again, just leave them in the comments below. We read and try and respond to those all as best we can. Beyond that, I want to thank our patrons for helping make content like this possible. And if you like to see things like this, definitely go ahead and check that out. I want to thank Electrix, as always, for providing our opening and closing themes. That being said, thank you for watching.